Here we are at the last chapter, chapter 13. So we're at 13.1, future usage. So we've already talked about how to form the futur simple, and now we're going to talk a little bit more about what we use it for. Because, as you know, you already know the futur proche, and you've known that since French 1. So let's just review that. The futur proche, remember, that was, you would take aller, and you would add it to your infinitive of a verb. So, je vais manger, je vais jouer, il va étudier. So, all you have to do is conjugate aller, and then you add the infinitive of whatever verb you wanted to put in the future. Now, so that's the futur proche. And in the futur simple, as we've seen, you need to go to the infinitive of your verb, and then you add on the endings right at the end of the verb. And remember the endings that we need: a, on, and a. And so we're going to put them right at the end of the verb, except for a list of irregular verbs that we've already looked at. But for instance, like if you were going to say, I will eat, we would just say, je, excuse me, mangerai. So we take manger, and we add the a to it, and now we have mangerai. We change the pronunciation just a little bit. So that's how we do the futur simple. So let's look at some of the differences. Well, the futur proche is more informal, and that's why a lot of times you'll be able to get away with using the futur proche instead of the futur simple, and just relying on what you've learned in French 1, and that will be okay for a lot of it. A lot of your speaking in informal situations. But the futur simple, you're going to want more formal. Okay? And so, of course, that also means for writing, you're going to want to use the futur simple when you're supposed to use the futur simple. So let's talk about really the connotations that are associated with each type. So remember, denotation, if a word has a denotation, you can think of a D for dictionary. That's a dictionary definition. But then we have connotations to words, which is what it makes us feel, or our personal associations with it, or a little bit deeper than just the dictionary definition. So the same thing with these. We're going to have situations where you probably should use one more than the other. Even though this is technically still talking about the future, there's some cases where you want to use this, and even though this is also still talking about the future, there's some cases where you should lean towards the futur simple. So those would be having it be close versus distant. If you're saying what you're going to do in the next 5 minutes, you're going to use this. If you're talking about what you're going to do in the distant future, you're going to use the futur simple. So what you're going to do after you graduate high school, what you're going to do after you graduate college, what you're going to do in 20 years, that has more of a distant nature to it. This is more close. And also, there's more of, because it's closer, there's more of a certainty to it. You're saying this is going to happen, versus an uncertainty. That you're planning on it happening, but it's 20 years in the future, so there's a bit of an uncertainty about that because it's so far in the future. So an example of this, one of the examples in the book was he is going to fall, versus he will fall. Okay? So he is going to fall. If you hear someone say he's going to fall, he's probably like rocking back and forth and like tripping over stuff and is on his way down. And someone needs to reach out and try to grab him so he doesn't fall. But he will fall. You might say that he will fall. That's somebody who's probably doing something that's likely to make him fall. maybe he has his shoes untied. I know teachers in middle school and elementary school always point that out. He'll fall, you'll fall, if you have your shoes untied. So it's likely that it's going to happen, but there's still some uncertainty, and we're saying it's probably going to happen, but it's uncertain. This is certain. He's going to fall. Like his shoelaces are tied together. He is going to fall. And again, that's what I mean by connotation. There's more of a feeling one way or the other. So let's move on. So the next part is, you'll see where there's a certain place where we're going to use the future tense, and often the futur simple, in French, where we don't at all use it in English. And it has to do with the word quand, or other phrases that work like the word quand, that basically mean when or as soon as. So in English, we'll say, let's see, and I'll say will. Oh, that's something else that I should point out. Usually with translations, it's will versus is going. I will versus I am going. And that's pretty simple, because you know that you have go in the futur proche and you don't have go in the futur simple. You don't have aller in there. Right, so we will have a party when, and in English we would say when he arrives. So let's look at the two tenses that we have in English. In English we say we will have a party. Will, so this would mean we're probably going to use the futur simple here. And then he arrives. Think about what tense that is. He arrives, okay? Right now. That's present tense in English. And this is where we get to our problem. In French, we use the future for both of them. And when I tell you the reason, in English, you can see that we have the present in the subordinate clause, and we have the future in our main clause. So we will have a party. That's what's going to happen. But our subordinate clause that begins with our when or as soon as, in English it's in the present, but in French we need to put it in the future. Okay, so in the French we need to say he will arrive. We need to put that in the futur simple also. Okay, now, and the reason for that is because really they're taking place at about the same time. Okay, let's look over this again, because more closely, because really the French is making more sense than the English at this point. We were saying we will have a party when he arrives. Well, he arrives is in the present, but he's not arriving right now. We're saying when he arrives in the future. So we will have a party in the future when he arrives, which is happening in the future. So it just makes more sense that both of them should be in the future. And you can also think of it as, well, if this is in the future and they're so related to each other, they're both happening around the same time, then they both have to be the future. So either way you want to think about it, just know that after you have a phrase like when or as soon as, in English we usually say in present tense, but in French you're going to have to say the future. So let's look at the example in French. So, nous ferons la fête. Like, we'll have a party, we'll party. The futur simple. Quand. And instead of il arrive, we have to put it in the futur simple. Arrive. Okay, arriver, we have our infinitive. Arrivera. Okay? So remember to change the pronunciation. It's not arriver à, it's arrivera. So that's it. It's really a simple thing. It's just a little bit confusing because the English is so different there. Okay? Voilà le futur simple.